So, serious question. What does it mean to make America great again? Right? And more specifically, how does moving away from DEI efforts make America better? Right? I want us to pause and think about that for just a second. And before you instantly move to a political stance, this video isn't about the left versus the right. It is truly about right versus wrong and what is best for us individually and collectively. Right? Diversity, equity, and inclusion is so tightly woven into our American history. And sadly, there has been a real effort to weaponize that acronym and make us afraid of it. But if you give me just a couple of minutes, I want to share a few simple explanations and a quick history lesson with some practical examples of what it actually means and what's at stake if we move away from it. Right. And I'll start with a question, right? Did you know that it wasn't until 1974 that women in the United States could open up a bank account on her own? Before that, she needed her husband's signature. Now, as a modern woman, it's almost unbelievable to think about that as a reality today. But that was just 2 years before I was born. That wasn't that long ago, people, right? And so if you have any knowledge of the history of DEI, you know that the primary beneficiary of DEI has been women. But like women who didn't have some very basic rights, neither did Black people. Right? Most people think of slavery being hundreds of years ago and that Black people should be over it by now. But most people don't realize that even after the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863, there was something called Black codes that then morphed into Jim Crow laws that governed how we existed in this country. So even though we were free, we weren't really free to live the great American dream. Even though Black people built this country with hundreds of years of backbreaking free labor, we weren't even seen as human, right? We were treated as property and counted as 3/5 of a person. So bear with me for a moment because history is being rewritten or removed from school curriculum right before our eyes. So I'm going to ask for your forgiveness in advance for stating some obvious or perhaps not so obvious facts about American history. But because of trailblazers like Ruby Bridges, we know that Black people couldn't go to the same schools as white people, right? It was illegal. Ruby Bridges is still alive and vibrant today. So that was not that long ago, right? Because of Rosa Parks, we know that the front of the bus was reserved for white people. We couldn't drink from the same water fountain or use the same bathrooms, not by choice. It was illegal, right? Practices like redlining prevented Black people from buying homes in certain neighborhoods. And these practices were still legal until 1968 when the Fair Housing Act was passed, right? In our great American history, there was a significant time when a Black person couldn't look a white woman in the eye or couldn't shake a white man's hand for fear that you got the impression that you were equal. Right? And if by chance you stepped out of line and broke the law, you were lynched, which was legal, right? And I say it like that because it seems so unfathomable today, right? But the last lynching, right, we have on record took place in 1981. That wasn't that long ago, people, right? Take a guess at when lynching was made illegal. Oh, wait. President Biden signed the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act into law in 2022. Right? So what does all of this have to do with DEI? I'm so glad you asked. Right? Without history and context, it might appear today that a certain group of people have some kind of unfair advantage when that is furthest from the truth. And that's also why there's a concerted effort to erase this very important piece of American history. The reality is that discrimination and segregation was legal and enforceable, right? Until 1964, when the Civil Rights Act was passed, right? That wasn't that long ago. This is right in the midst of the civil rights movement when there was a real push for social justice and equal rights under the law. And so DEI efforts are just a continuation of the civil rights movement. It's been called lots of things, but the purpose is simply to ensure that every individual has equal access to opportunities and resources, regardless of their background. That's a good thing, not something that we should be trying to reverse, right? And so for those of us who have worked in this space, we know that the research has shown that diverse teams bring different perspectives that lead to more creative solutions and innovation that makes America great. Right? We know that diverse workforces tend to perform better financially and have higher employee satisfaction. We know that companies who are committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion have stronger brands, and they also create a culture that fosters a sense of belonging for the very people they depend on to power their company. Right? And so if you're a corporate leader, you know how important that is for business. So why would we want to overturn all of this? How does this make America great again? And when exactly was America great and for who? Right? Diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts are simply an attempt to make right this horribly unequal and unjust history we have here in the United States, to make sure that we all have basic civil rights and opportunities, right? So today, it's bigger than just race and gender, right? The movement protects and supports anyone who has been marginalized, oppressed, or discriminated against based off of lots of other things like religion, sexual orientation, age, ability, culture, ethnicity. So when people say that they are against DEI, I want you to pause and ask yourself why. If you want to be even a little bit more thoughtful, I invite you to unpack the words connected to the acronym DEI because they each mean something different. Right? Diversity is simply recognizing that we're not all the same. But what's the opposite of diversity? It's homogeneity or sameness, right? The thought that we should focus on or center one type of person. And so when we look at the rich diversity in our country, who might that be? And why would we want to do that? Equity is simply fairness. It recognizes that there's not a one size fits all for everyone, but it makes sure that people get what they need when they need it. And so in this anti-DEI era, what is the opposite of equity? Well, I'm glad you asked, right? If you Google it, words that come up are bias, prejudice, inequity, unfairness, right? So is that what we want when we say we want to reverse or eliminate DEI efforts? Inclusion is pretty self-explanatory. I think we all want to be included, right? The opposite is exclusion. So again, who would be included and who would be excluded? So I'll end by asking you again, how does moving away from DEI help us to make America great? Personally, I don't think it does, but I'd love to hear from you, right? If you've gotten to the end of this video, thank you so much for watching. And thank you in advance for being kind in the comments as you share your thoughts.